Hello and welcome to Freedom Watch, your daily dose of raw liberty, streaming online at foxnews.com. I'm your host, Judge Andrew Napolitano, here defending freedom, defending your natural rights, and defending your right to have a government that stays within the confines of the Constitution. Listen to this. The headline in the Austin American-Statesman newspaper of Wednesday of this week reads like this, quote, Medina has fundamentally changed GOP race for governor. In the Republican primary for governor in Texas, Governor Rick Perry still has a comfortable lead in all the major polls, followed by Texas Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison. But it is Deborah Medina, the Republican candidate for Texas governor, the constitutional candidate, the Tea Party candidate, who is raising eyebrows all across the state. The most recent Rasmussen poll conducted on Monday of this week shows Deborah Medina's support has quadrupled since the last poll conducted in November. That's an enormous leap for a candidate that no pollster or political pundit could ever have predicted would be doing this well. Joining me now from Texas, Deborah Medina. Deborah, it's a pleasure. Welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Good afternoon, Judge. Great to be with you.
You must be ecstatic at the progress that you've been showing in the polls to the point where the governor of the state and the senior senator from the state have finally agreed to sit down and debate you in front of TV audiences.
We've had two debates now. Hands down, the folks around Texas believe that I won that debate. Far and away clear. Lowest post-debate poll numbers we had was 63% victory. A couple of polls show us with 91, 92% victory in those debates. Texans are getting the bit between their teeth when we're talking about freedom again, and when the choices are big government or freedom, we're opting for freedom. We're choosing freedom in Texas. This is an exciting race. We've got 2 weeks until early voting starts. People are digging in all across the state. I think something that the poll numbers are not showing, Austin American-Statesman also reported that we had 3 times the number of donors in this most recent reporting period as either Kay or Governor Perry. So people really are, they're not writing the $250,000 checks that the other candidates are getting, but we're getting those $20 and $50 and $100 contributors, and lots of energy and excitement in this We Texans campaign. We're going to win this race in Texas.
Now, in full disclosure, you and I have talked about your race off air, and I have talked about the race off air with Governor Perry, and I have talked about the race off air as well as on with Senator Hutchison. This is a race, correct me if I'm wrong, for the heart and soul of the Republican Party. And the Republican Party in Texas seems to be going away from big government and more toward what I will call its Barry Goldwater roots of the primacy of the individual and the notion of limited government. But you have taken the notion of limited government from the federal level down to the state level, that the state government itself should have limitations imposed upon it. This must be selling like wildfire in a Texas prairie.
Well, we have really made a cornerstone of this campaign the notion that private property ownership is an essential element of freedom. I think our founders understood that. Certainly, the patriots here in Texas, the settlers in Texas, understood how important private property ownership was to freedom and is to freedom. And yet we have seen the governor playing with the property tax system here in Texas such that we have one of the highest property taxes in the country. We don't own our land anymore. You and I would both agree, I think, that where there is freedom, there is prosperity. We're going to get rid of property tax in Texas and see a rejuvenation of our economy as a result of that. And that is the thing that is helping people understand what a limited government individual freedom actually looks like and how good it would be for all of Texas and indeed all of the country. You
and I talked about eliminating the federal income tax. Could you imagine how prosperous Americans would be if they could keep 100% of what they earn? One of the advantages of that is not so much to switch revenue sources, but to shrink the government. By sending fewer dollars to the government has less money to spend, less things to do. And when government does less, we have more freedom, more personal freedom.
The elimination of property tax and moving to a consumption model also makes the government more transparent and accountable. We find in Texas that government manipulates both the tax rate and the appraised value of the property. And so it's very difficult as individuals to keep government spending limited. In a consumption tax model, that would be something much easier to do. And we were fortunate this weekend to have a man here in Texas who is kind of seen as the guru of state appropriations, Mr. Talmadge Heflin, who was longtime chair of the Texas House Committee on Appropriations, say that this can be done in Texas, it should be done in Texas, and it would be relatively simple to do. So I think for the naysayers and the doubters out there, have a little faith. Watch freedom work, let freedom work, and you'll see prosperity return in ways that many of us haven't dreamed about in years. It's time we're dreaming again in Texas, and people are getting pretty excited about it.
I can imagine that running against the incumbent sitting governor and one of the incumbent sitting senators means you're running against the leadership of the Republican Party. Or am I wrong? Are Republican leaders themselves, who sometimes fall for the trappings of big government, against which people like you and I have been campaigning throughout our adult lives, have some of them begun to recognize that your small government, very, very low tax, primacy of the individual, my property is my own campaign, is actually catching on, and they better jump on the bandwagon too?
We've started saying here in Texas that the litmus test in the Republican Party ought to be a little bit more than just are you pro-life. The question is, are you also pro-property? We've had eminent domain abuse here in Texas in addition to the property tax fiascos. People are realizing how important private property ownership is, and we're beginning to hear that buzz in campaigns for state rep and state senate around the state, where those folks running are understanding how important it is. They're beginning to talk about that issue. I've said I'm not running to be monarch, I'm running to be governor. We need a legislature that's going to give us this legislation. We need to be working together, and this really is a We Texans campaign. You're seeing people, as you know, 912 groups, Tea Party groups, and other folks who haven't been active before getting active in this time, and we're going to see some real change. I expect, as you've indicated, Texas will lead the country back to our constitutional roots, and it's going to be a good thing for our nation and indeed a good thing for our world.
Well, you must be catching fire also over the eminent domain issue. Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the governor or didn't the Texas legislature condemn a huge amount of property to build some super highway from Mexico to the other end of Texas? And isn't that something that's profoundly disturbing to the concept of my property is my own and I can do with it what I want and the government can't take it away from me against my will?
Right. That has mobilized Texans more than anything else against Governor Rick Perry, and he has come out time and again and said that that highway is dead, but it's died 5 deaths already. It continues to come back, and just in testimony up in Austin this week, one of the TxDOT officials, one of the Texas Department of Transportation officials admitted that, yes, the plans are still fully in play. We understand that. The governor is posturing. He postures politically, as do many incumbents during the time of an election, to tell us what we want to hear. But we've got records of testimony in the Capitol this week saying that they are still working towards the Trans-Texas Corridor. Senator Hutchison has a very similar plan in her transportation plans. So I have said that they are two sides of the same coin. They are both big government ideologues. The governor has beat the senator up for voting for the bailout at the federal level, and yet he's got very similar economic funds here in Texas. He, for example, gave a big corporate slush bailout handout, if you will, to Countrywide before their failure. We've seen the same sorts of economic policies implemented here in Texas that our governor is criticizing the senator for. They are both big government, Trans-Texas Corridor, NAFTA superhighway types of individuals with those sorts of ideas. Deborah Medina and We Texans are championing a very limited government, proper balance between a sovereign state and a limited federal government. We're going to show the country what that looks like, and I think enjoy the prosperity that comes with that kind of limited view of what the government ought to be doing. We've got a tremendous energy sector, ag sector, healthcare sector, IT sector here in Texas.
Right.
We'll get the government and really focusing here on getting the EPA out of ag, energy, and manufacturing. Can you imagine what that will do for industry in Texas
Absolutely.
if we begin to back the EPA out of those areas and tell Texas entrepreneurs, you want to buy, sell, produce, get out there and get after it. When Texas starts to get out there and get after it, this economic slump that we're in will turn around.
I have to believe that in a state like Texas, when you give people a choice between big government and personal freedom, there's no question but that they're going to choose personal freedom. You're certainly making your mark and certainly making the case. Deborah Medina, come back and join us again.